The torrential rain pounded on the corrugated metal eaves of the dormitory building, producing a dull, grating roar. My nape struck heavily against the cold, hard cement floor, and the last image in my sight was 3 pairs of feet extending from the edge of the dorm roof, and 3 expressionless faces under the rooftop spotlight. The view quickly blanketed by a dark red liquid with a fishy smell, and the rain in my ears turned from noise to dead silence. In the next moment, a violent sense of suffocation suddenly clogged my throat. There was no sharp pain, no cold rain. My right hand was gripping a brass-colored door handle tightly, its touch cold and dry. On the wooden door before me, there were glue marks left by peeled stickers. "This is the door to room 302 of the girls' dormitory at Jiang City University." The electronic watch on my arm showed the date, September 12, 2024, 22:15. The second week of the spring semester of the 3rd year. I did not pant, nor did I move my eyes to look around. I very slowly pressed the brass doorknob down until it clicked, the door hinge turning, revealing a 3-finger-wide gap. The dorm's fluorescent tube hummed softly. 3 people sat around the table. Emma held a pair of tweezers, carefully pinching a black bank card with a chip, held under a desk lamp for close observation. Sarah held a foreign language journal in her hand, using a utility knife to neatly cut off the anti-counterfeiting label from the appendix page. Lily sat at the computer, her fingers rapidly tapping on the keyboard, the screen flashing with several lines of back-end access command text. In the center of the table lay an opened manila envelope, inside stacked with a full sheet of anonymous credit card authorization applications, unstamped. Chloe's stiff brain would never guess that this set of software can bypass the finance department's dual verification directly. Emma's voice was low, with a hint of sharp tremor she couldn't control. Sarah used tweezers to precisely place the cut anti-counterfeiting label in the top right corner of a form, then sneered. "She spends all her time in the lab, and forgets that she herself wrote the loophole in this system. Once next month's funds are transferred, this bill will all be charged to the development account she left from last semester." Lily said nothing, but quickly pressed enter, and the printer immediately produced a confirmation that bore the style of the university's finance department seal. I stood in the shadows outside the door, my body not tremoring at all, my breathing rate even unchanged. I lowered the black backpack that rested on my shoulders, then drew a neatly folded A4 sheet from my pocket with my right hand. That afternoon I had already had the department's administration stamp the student-initiated move-out from dormitory and off-campus housing application form. I opened the door. The huge wooden door slammed against the wall with a loud crack. The 3 inside froze instantly. The tweezers in Emma's hand trembled, and the black bank card clattered onto the desk. Sarah instinctively shielded the cut journal with her body. Lily rapidly pressed a keyboard shortcut, switching the computer screen to a normal web page interface. I did not look at any of their faces, nor did I look at the envelope on the table. I walked straight toward my own windowside bed. The bed contained nothing extraneous, only a 28-inch black suitcase with its zipper already closed. I reached up to pull the metal handle of the suitcase. The wheels on the wooden floor rasped with a clattering slide. Then I stood at the wooden table nearest the door, placing the red-stamped departure cancellation form flat in the exact center of the desk, pressing it along the edge of the manila envelope. "Chloe, what do you mean by this?" Emma stood up, hands flat on the table, trying to block the evidence behind her, her voice clearly edged with caution. I did not answer. I pulled my suitcase, turned around, and walked straight out of dorm 302. The wheels of the heavy suitcase rolled over the hallway tiles, making a steady, continuous rumble. I went down the corridor, through the dark stairwell, and stopped in front of the front desk window in the administrator's duty room on the 1st floor of the dormitory building. The desk lamp was on. The dormitory auntie was holding a teacup and watching TV. I raised my hand and knocked on the glass. The window opened. I slid another identical dorm departure form and the brass key to dorm 302 across the wooden windowsill. "Bed 302 is vacant. The key is returned. The procedures are complete." My voice was steady, clearly coming through the duty room. The auntie paused, picked up the key and form to take a look, then looked up at me again. "Moving out so late? Do your roommates know?" I said nothing, only pointed to the official college seal stamped on the bottom right corner of the form. The auntie frowned, did not ask further, and tore off the receipt and handed it out. I took the receipt, turned, and pushed open the large glass door of the dormitory. There was no rain outside. The night wind was cool, and the street lamps cast long shadows of the plane trees along the campus road. I pulled the suitcase and followed the smooth asphalt road toward the campus gate. Not far from the gate, less than 500 meters away, on the rooftop of a tall apartment building, a single apartment I had already signed a lease for and paid a year's rent, was glowing with a faint indicator light. There are an independent data interface, a non-networked offline server, and a newly installed high-definition monitoring terminal. The wheels of the suitcase traced their final path in front of the iron bars at the campus gate. I paused and looked back at the third-year female students' dormitory building, at the third-floor window where the daylight lamp was still on. The upstairs light flickered, and behind the curtains, 3 figures moved in tandem, barely discernible. I averted my gaze, lifted the suitcase, and stepped into the night outside the campus gates. The room on the top floor of the apartment was unbelievably quiet, with only the 2-band router indicator lights flickering green in the dark. I sat at the desk, 2 computers placed side by side. On the left monitor, the backstage countdown of the university's academic results submission system was displayed. On the right monitor, the live-streamed data flow from the dorm network was being transmitted via a micro receiver. The data stream showed a sharp fluctuation at 2340. That was Lily's account attempting to log into my cloud drive database. I didn't obstruct it in any way, and even 2 minutes earlier I had proactively disabled the secondary dynamic password for the cloud drive, switching to the simplest password access. In no time, a progress bar popped up on the right screen. A folder named Anomaly Detection in Financial Data based on Multimodal Algorithms was fully downloaded, with the transfer progress reaching 100%. That was the draft of the academic competition paper I had spent 3 full months on last semester. The next morning at 10, the academic competition notice on the official website of the Academic Affairs Office refreshed. Anomaly detection in financial data based on multimodal algorithms topped the list. The applicant field listed 3 names: Emma, Sarah, Lily. No Chloe. Moreover, they had even forged the submission time to 2 weeks earlier, and in the notes column marked team development independently. No other participants involved. I sat in a quiet corner by the library window, my black biro drawing an extremely precise logical flowchart on white paper. I opened the university's largest forum, Jian University Treehole, and registered a brand new anonymous account. I didn't post any exposing or accusing text, but directly found the post boasting that 3 top students in Dorm 302 have won a top academic competition nomination. I opened the post, moved the mouse to the top right corner, clicked pin, and casually threw in 100 forum points, tagging the post as hot. In half an hour, the post's views surpassed 10,000, and the comments below were filled with admiration and adulation. Amazing! A junior in the 3rd year winning this level of algorithm competition. I heard this result might even earn additional points toward this year's national scholarship. Hearing the post reach its peak popularity, I opened my own academic submission backend. They thought they had obtained the complete source code, but what they didn't know was that between lines 342 and 358 of that draft code, I had embedded a highly covert dynamic obfuscation function. This function did not affect the program's outward operation, but as long as a fixed set of random seeds was input at a specific time, the program would automatically, within the underlying generated data reports, spit out a string composed of a 16-digit hexadecimal array. That was my exclusive digital fingerprint generated from my identity card number and date of birth using an irreversible hash algorithm. Not only that, I had added a piece in the underlying library files that would trigger an offline log recording script on a specific date. As long as they ran the code more than 50 times, this script would automatically upload a verification package containing their device MAC addresses and modification timestamps to the campus LAN's log server. I closed the laptop, put the cap back on the black pen, and emitted a crisp click. Sunlight poured in through the library's floor-to-ceiling windows, lighting up the dark A side of the computer. I packed up, stood, and passed by the bulletin board in the hallway. The bulletin board was crowded with people. Emma stood in the center of the crowd, holding the freshly printed preliminary approval certificate for the competition, a refined and graceful smile on her face, thanking the surrounding students in unison. Sarah and Lily stood on either side of her, holding the rewards gift boxes just issued by the academy. I quietly slipped through the crowd's edge, my soles meeting the smooth marble floor without making a single sound. As we brushed past each other, Emma happened to turn around, her eyes carrying a trace of concealed pride and provocation. I didn't look at her, nor did my steps pause at all, and I pushed open the glass door directly. The sycamore leaves along the tree-lined avenue began to turn yellow, and banners advertising sponsor talks from major companies hung along both sides of the campus road. At 4:30 on Friday afternoon, a black Mercedes Maybach drove past the east gate of Jiang City University and parked steadily below Building 302. The door opened, and Emma stepped out in a Chanel-inspired tweed suit, wearing 7-centimeter heels, a meticulously wrapped Hermes paper bag in her hand. Curious students crowded the open space in front of the dormitory. Emma has won the special sponsorship scholarship set up by Huyao Group. A full 100,000 yuan. I heard the entire school has only one slot. Oh my god. I heard the sponsor personally drove her home. This resource is really top tier. The whispers rose and fell. Emma stood by the car, smiling and waving to a middle-aged man inside the car who wore sunglasses, her eyes betraying undisguised pride. Standing outside the crowd under the shade of a tree, I pulled a long telephoto camera with 30x optical zoom from the pocket of my black trench coat. I pressed the shutter quietly, and the icy glass lens instantly locked onto the license plate, Jianghe 88392. This car didn't belong to Huyao Group at all. It was registered under a shell company named Xinqing Financial Advisory. The middle-aged man in the car, wearing sunglasses, wasn't a corporate executive but a broker who profited by helping forge tax proofs and official seals, named Mark. I put away the camera and turned toward the bus stop at the school gate. Half an hour later, I appeared outside a private club 6 kilometers from the university. The club was hidden in a quiet alley, its entrance surrounded by a variety of luxury cars. I changed into a dark work uniform with no identifying marks, carried a tray full of cleaning supplies, and avoided the main gate security, walking straight through a side employee entrance. The door to a private box at the far end of the second floor was ajar just a crack. Through the gap, I could see Emma sitting on a rosewood sofa. Mark sat opposite her, holding a hard rubber stamp with ink, stamping it heavily on several yellowed invoices and deposit slips. These are the 12 invoices you asked for, all issued under the heading of Jiang City University Student Union Activities Funding, each just around 29,000, to avoid the auditing red line above 30,000. Mark pushed the stamped invoices in front of Emma, his lips curling into a greedy smile. A total credit limit of 350,000. I take a 30% intermediary fee, cash on the spot. Emma reached for the stack of invoices, examined them carefully, then drew a heavy black tape-wrapped package from the Hermes bag and pushed it directly in front of Mark. This is 11,000 cash. If you can wipe the accounts for the welcome night and the academic competition, there's a much larger sum waiting behind. I stood in the shadows, softly adjusting the angle of my wrist. The spy camera embedded in the sleeve cuff captured every detail, the seal numbers on the invoices, the handover actions between the two, and the corner of the black package that revealed 100 yuan notes, recording at 60 frames per second in ultra-high definition. A crisp clink of teacups echoed from the box. Relax. I've already processed the voucher copy for these invoices. Even if the school goes to the tax bureau, they'll only find a recently cancelled clothing wholesale market from last month. Mark patted his chest, assuring. Emma pulled out her phone, opened the bank app, and swiped quickly on the screen. I've already linked this grant to that Chloe who left the dormitory earlier. Her student ID and bank card information are still stored in the old student council system. If anything goes wrong, the corporate audit will only look at her. A cold, determined smile lingered on her face. I didn't linger outside the club for even a second. After confirming that the video file had been transmitted in real time to the encrypted cloud, I silently slipped out along the same way I came. Back at the apartment, I inserted the memory card from the camera into the card reader. Dozens of crystal-clear captured photos suddenly popped up on the screen. The financial seal number, code, and amount on the invoice receipt, as well as the scanned copy of Mark's identification, were marked with red boxes one by one. I calmly opened the local tax inspection reporting system entrance, and packaged all the high-definition scans of the invoices, the club's transaction video screenshots, and the vehicle registration information of that Maybach into an encrypted compressed file. But I did not press send. It wasn't time yet. The ledger now is only a gap on paper. Only when they actually spend this money, and when those 12 fake invoices are officially submitted to the school's finance office reimbursement system, will the bomb's power be unleashed to its maximum. I opened another window and pulled up the reimbursement flowchart for Jiang City University's finance office. The system showed that the deadline for the Student Union Welcome Party reimbursement application was exactly next Wednesday at 5 p.m. And the head of the finance office auditing the reimbursement vouchers was the school's notoriously strict old professor. I sat in the dark room, the white light from the screen reflecting on my expressionless face. I dragged the compressed file into a draft mailbox with a preset timer sending function, the countdown freezing at 4:30 p.m. next Wednesday. Then I reached into a drawer and pulled out a new notebook, flipped to the first page, and drew a heavy red mark beside Emma's name. On Monday early morning at 6, the building of the National Key Laboratory was still shrouded in light mist. I wore a white lab coat, carried a disinfection box, avoided the main corridor surveillance, and used a level 2 access card to push open the door to Organic Synthesis Lab, a 302, on the 3rd floor. The air reeked with the pungent odor of volatile organic solvents. I walked straight to the dangerous chemicals storage cabinet beside the fume hood. Inside the glass doors, the reagents were arranged in neat rows. I looked up and my gaze fixed on a glass bottle in the top left. Tightly wrapped with black light shielding paper, a bottle of highly concentrated cyanogenic fluorescence derivative reagent, a strictly controlled highly toxic and explosive substance, requiring two-person two-lock registration for both application and use. In the inconspicuous gap beneath the reagent bottle on a metal stand, a tiny green bean-sized wireless micro camera blinked with infrared light invisible to the naked eye. I pulled up my phone and retrieved the surveillance playback from the previous night. The footage showed, at 2:15 a.m., a person wearing a hoodie sneaking into the lab with a stolen duplicate spare key. She skillfully bypassed the fume hood, pried open the side lock of the hazardous chemical cabinet with a tool, removed the black light shielding bottle, and stowed it into a small bag with insulation. When she pulled down the hood, Sarah's face, a touch twisted from nerves, was clearly visible in the dim light. She was at a critical juncture in her bid for graduate study, and her competitor had just published a paper in Nature subjournal about the colorimetric reaction of the reagent. As long as this bottle went abnormally missing at the opponent's key experimental moment and was found by chance, the opponent would not only lose their graduate study eligibility but would also face safety liability actions, including staying on campus for review or even expulsion. I closed the playback and took out an identical-looking black light shielding glass bottle from the disinfection box. Inside was a liquid I had prepared late last night in my personal lab by mixing ordinary amino acids with harmless, non-toxic common fluorescent indicators. In appearance, viscosity, and refraction under sunlight, it was indistinguishable from that poisonous reagent. More importantly, I had added a specific colorless marker to this harmless indicator whenever it touches skin or fabric. Under an ordinary 365 nanometer UV lamp it will emit a very strong and hard-to-wash pale blue fluorescence. I reached to open the hazardous cabinet, nudged the base that had been left by Sarah when she took the bottle, and precisely placed this harmless indicator bottle inside, while adjusting the bottle's angle to ensure the miniature camera could clearly capture the concealed code pasted on the bottom. As for the real high-risk toxic reagent that Sarah had stolen, I turned around and looked at the corridor outside the lab door. About half an hour after she stole the reagent, I used the IoT tracking tag to locate its whereabouts. Sarah did not take it off campus, nor did she dare bring it back to her current dorm. Instead, relying on familiarity with the old dorm, she quietly hid it in the top concealed compartment of the wooden wardrobe on the top bunk of the dorm 302, using an old key she had kept. She intended to frame me, the person who had already moved out of the dorm, for all the crime of illegally possessing toxic hazardous chemicals. I packed away my tools, shed the white coat, and tidied my belongings. When I reached the door of the lab, I looked back at the replacement bottle quietly resting in the hazardous cabinet. The first ray of sunlight outside pierced through the mist and shone on the glass door, refracting a cold, hard light. Sarah thought she controlled the weapon that could destroy others. Yet she did not know that what she had just brought back to the dorm was nothing more than a large fluorescent dye bomb that could blow up her own life at any moment. I pushed open the lab door and stepped into the early morning, icy air. Night had fallen completely. In Jiang City University's auditorium, lights glittered brilliantly. On the giant LED screen, gilded characters circulated. The Jiang City University Third Youth Student Representatives Conference and Welcome Evening. The air was thick with the sweet scent of expensive perfume and artificial fog. In the backstage dressing room, glaring makeup lights shone around a mirror. Lily, wearing a custom silver sequined gown, stood before a full-length mirror, carefully arranging the tassel earrings by her ears. As the chairwoman of the student union, this gala was a bold, highlights-filled entry in her resume. To support the event, she had not only secured an ample activity budget from the school but also attracted sponsorship from 3 well-known companies. But at this moment, her assistant hurried over with a handwritten materials list. Pale-faced, chairwoman, the outsourced lighting and sound team just urged for the third time. The final payment of $60,000 hasn't arrived. If the final payment isn't received within half an hour, they'll cut the main control console power. Lily turned around, her brows slightly furrowed, the lip gloss on her lips pressed into a straight line. What are they rushing for? Rushing to threaten someone to death? Didn't we just apply for a special fund of $150,000 from finance? How can there not be enough even for the final payment? That $150,000. The assistant glanced around, lowered his voice. Last week Emma used it to plug the hole in that fake subsidy. The accounts simply don't balance. Now the finance office is watching. If this sum isn't cleared today, the audit department will come to review the accounts tomorrow. Lily's face instantly darkened, but she quickly laughed coldly. What panic? Just pin it on someone. The backstage control rights for the welcome evening have always been under the old account of Chloe, the one who had dropped out. In the system logs, the final confirmers of all fund flows are still her. If we publicly claim that she used her position to illegally transfer sponsorship funds, we can walk away clean. But won't the school's technical audit uncover it? The assistant still hesitated. Uncover it? She's moved out long ago. Even the campus network IP address has been switched to an external dynamic broadband. If it's mud in the pants, it's mud. Lily snorted, tossing the tablet into the makeup case. Go. Change the host's closing remarks. When the performance reaches its climax, directly send this notice of abnormal sponsorship funds to the main control backend of the big screen. Outside the dressing room, in the shadows, I leaned against the cold latex-painted wall, absorbing every sentence and every expression of their conversation. I raised my right hand, lightly tapping the screen of a locally running script on my phone. On the screen, the main backend of the school auditorium's giant LED screen was being mapped in real time. Lily thought that the old account she had exploited was a flaw, but she didn't know that from the day I moved out of the dorm, I had already transformed that account into a fully automatic mirror reverse trigger. Any attempt to use that account to tamper with accounts or frame others would, the moment the enter key was pressed, be intercepted in real time, encrypted, and a clone of a complete evidence chain containing the user's real IP, keystroke frequency, and MAC address would be sent to the school disciplinary committee and the finance audit department's backup email inboxes. I put away my phone, adjusted the black hoodie I wore, and stepped into the backstage crowd. The gala began on time. The audience erupted in applause at the front of the stage, and the host's clear, resonant voice carried through the sound system to the entire auditorium. In the backstage control room, Lily sat before the computer, watching the live online audience count rise, a smug smile curving at the corners of her mouth. She turned her head to exchange a glance with the assistant beside her. This is almost ready. Push the prepared abnormal finance brief to the large screen so everyone can see Chloe's true face. The assistant trembled and extended a finger, pressing the enter key on the keyboard. Countdown. 3, 2, 1, push. The giant LED screen, measuring about 20 square meters, in the center of the hall suddenly flickered, and the previously playing highlights of the party vanished in an instant. In its place appeared a screenshot in a red-headed document format with exceptionally clear typography and bold handwriting. Thousands of teachers and students in the audience fell silent at once, and everyone's gaze fixed on the big screen. However, the text that appeared on the screen was not the accusation Lily had anticipated about Chloe misappropriating sponsorship funds, but a clear, Auditable report titled Audit and Investigation into the Misuse of Sponsorship Funds for the School Student Union Welcome Party and Fictitious Reimbursements. On the first page of the report, there were 12 fake invoices stamped with counterfeit seals, their total amount amounting to 350,000 yuan. Immediately below, a dynamically updated data analysis chart appeared at the bottom of the screen. In the chart, red arrows clearly outlined the flow of funds, starting from the account of a shell company used by Xianqing Financial Consulting, transferring into Emma's personal account, then via fake procurement projects to Lily and Sarah's names. At the end of the entire operation, the precise physical address of the operator's device and the corresponding MAC address of the student union president's office computer were clearly marked. The hall erupted in an uproar. A few college leaders in the front row had their faces turn ashen, and the secretary of the University Discipline Inspection Commission abruptly stood up, his eyes sweeping toward the backstage like blades. In the dressing room, Lily's smile froze on her face as she stared rigidly at the chart on the big screen, her fingers trembling violently as she turned to look at the computer screen. What's going on? This can't be possible. How did our accounts end up here? I stood in a corner behind the scenes, coldly watching her panicked figure. The party's lively music continued, but the audience had already begun to voice questions and discussions one after another. Lily staggered out of the dressing room, her face pallid as paper, and her lips blue and dry. I said nothing, only turned quietly, pulled the brim of my baseball cap down, and walked out of the auditorium doors. The second morning after the hall's public opinion had fermented, sunlight was blocked by thick clouds, and the air was damp and oppressive. A special investigation team, jointly formed by the University Discipline Inspection Commission, the Academic Affairs Office, and the Dormitory Management Section, under the guidance of a counselor, came straight to the entrance of Dormitory Building 302 for third-year female students. Emma, Sarah, and Lily stood in the middle of the dormitory, their faces pale and their gazes wandering. The desk was piled with personal items that had not yet been tidied, as well as various false vouchers hastily retrieved from backstage after yesterday's party. Knock, knock, knock. The heavy banging on the door shattered the stillness. The counselor pushed the door open, followed by two discipline inspection officers with stern expressions and a campus police officer wearing an enforcement recording device. Warranted anonymous report received. Dorm 302 is suspected of storing high-risk chemicals, forging official seals, and keeping vouchers of illegal funds with unknown sources. The discipline inspection officer's voice was cold and devoid of warmth, sweeping across the three in the room. Everyone out into the corridor for a routine surprise inspection. Emma's body trembled violently, and she and Sarah exchanged a rapid, furtive glance. Since the hall's big screen exploded with the truth last night, they had been thrown into disarray. To prevent being caught with contraband, Sarah, under the cover of darkness, had packed all the fake invoices, privately carved official seals, and the bottle of stolen toxic reagent from her own cabinet, and stuffed them all into the wooden wardrobe beneath the bed by the window that had always been empty. That wardrobe belonged to Chloe. As they understood it, if they could forcibly attribute all evidence to Chloe, who had already moved out, didn't clean up her personal items, they could at this critical juncture dump all the dirt back onto me. Teacher, our dorm has always followed the rules. Sarah's voice trembled as she stepped forward, pointing to the empty cabinet by the window. That cabinet belongs to Chloe. After she secretly moved out, she kept the key on her person, and the cabinet has always been locked with a heavy padlock. We usually can't even open it, and we have no idea what's inside. Emma hurried to agree. Yes. She moved out very abruptly, and didn't even inform us. We suspect she locked those messy prohibited items in her private cabinet. The counselor frowned, turning to the campus police officer. Pry open the lock. The campus police officer stepped forward, pulling on plastic gloves and using bolt cutters, and with a snap cut through the metal padlock on the wooden cabinet door. Just as the wooden cabinet door was slowly pulled open, plop! Hidden on the inside of the cabinet door, a micro-pneumatic ejection device was triggered in an instant. The pressure difference whipped up a faint breeze. There was no exploding dust, no offensive substances, only a paper agreement, folded so tightly and stamped with a red seal across the seam, dropping precisely from a recessed shelf above into the officer's feet. Meanwhile, A black plastic seal box perched at the top of the cabinet toppled and fell due to the cabinet doors yanking, scattering its contents all over the place. That was nothing that could be framed as Chloe's items. On the floor lay 3 originals of a private agreement signed with their 3 ID numbers regarding dividing the student union's sponsorship funds and academic competition prizes, each clearly bearing their 3 fingerprints. Next to them were 6 fake official seals sealed tightly in a plastic bag. Seals bearing the words Xinjiang Financial Consulting Company, Limited and Jiang City University Academic Committee Audit Special Purpose. And at the most central position lay the original English-language academic journal, its anti-counterfeiting pages cut out. What was truly hidden deepest in the cabinet was a pre-printed transfer departure statement that had long been filled out. It clearly recorded, "This cabinet was completely emptied and checked at 22:30 on September 12, 2024. The other 3 people in the room have signed to confirm, and there are no personal belongings left inside." Under this statement, there was an accompanying receipt issued by the Dormitory Administration Department for a photographed evidence of the clearance. Ironclad proof. "Is this what you call Chloe's leftovers?" A school disciplinary committee member picked up the private agreement on the ground, his face turning stark with rage as he read the bright red fingerprints and the minute profit-sharing ratios. Faking official seals, misusing seals, privately dividing public funds, academic fraud. The 3 of you are bolder than the sky. No! This isn't ours. This is a trap. Chloe is setting us up. Lily shrieked hysterically, reaching out to grab the agreement. A school policeman shoved her aside. Standing at the far side, Sarah collapsed completely, her legs giving way as she sank to the carpet. She stared at the journal and the fake seal on the floor. Her eyes reddened, her lips trembling violently, unable to utter a single word. They thought their fatal secret, hidden so perfectly, could become a weapon to bring others down. But from the moment I quietly wheeled my suitcase out of the dormitory, I had already pinned them with the sharpest rules, right around their own necks. On the corridor just outside the stairwell, I stood in a crisp black suit, quietly leaning against the wall, watching the school police seal the seized seal, agreement, and fake accounting book into evidence bags. Watching the 3 of them being hustled out of room 302, I stretched out my hand and gently smoothed the wrinkles on my sleeve. In the report hall on the 3rd floor of the University Administration Building, a continuous, low-pitched hum came from the air conditioning vents. An emergency hearing of Jiang City University's highest academic committee was taking place here. Behind the long redwood conference table sat 7 stern-faced senior professors, deans, and the university's legal representative. Emma, Sarah, and Lily sat at the witness table, their eye sockets dark, their faces gaunt. Although the previous round of investigations into financial and dorm violations had drained their energy, they still clung to a glimmer of luck about the academic misconduct ruling, if they could insist that the paper was developed independently by the 3 of them, and if there was no direct monitoring of the creation process, the academic committee would find it difficult to make an absolute determination of plagiarism. The paper Anomaly Detection in Financial Data Based on Multimodal Algorithms was submitted 2 weeks ago. The chair of the academic committee, sitting in the center, tapped the wooden gavel, his gaze sharp as he swept across the room. The complainant, Chloe, has filed an originality complaint, claiming that the underlying architecture of the algorithm and the core code were produced independently by her. What explanations do the accused have? Emma suddenly stood up, her voice sharp and urgent. Honorable professors and leaders, this is Chloe's vicious retaliation against the 3 of us. Every mathematical model, algorithm derivation, and code we wrote, line by line, burning the midnight oil in our dorm for a month. The so-called draft she submitted unilaterally was just her sneaking in while we weren't paying attention and copying from our shared hard drive. Sarah followed suit, lifting a thick handwritten notebook high. This is our algorithmic derivation manuscript. It contains detailed dates and computational steps. How could Chloe independently complete such a massive multimodal algorithm after moving out of the dorm at the start of junior year and living in isolation? Lily sat nearby, her damp eyes looking at the legal representative, feigning victimhood. We, out of the sense of friendship as former roommates, have never pursued responsibility for her unauthorized copying of our core result, but we never imagined she would turn the tables. A hush drifted through the spectators in the stands. Several professors lowered their heads to look at the photocopies of the handwritten notes on the table. Their brows furrowed slightly. I sat at the witness seat opposite, in a sharp black suit, my spine straight. I showed no anger or anxiety on my face. I watched their dramatic, impassioned performance silently until the gavel struck again and the hall fell silent. Complainant Chloe, it's your turn to present evidence. The chair looked at me. I stood up, not glancing at them, and simply pulled a nondescript black USB drive from my medium-sized briefcase, walking steadily to the podium and inserting the USB drive into the main control computer connected to the big screen. Honorable professors, baseless verbal arguments and handwritten notes that can be amended at any time hold no weight against digital code. My voice was cold and clear. Through the microphone, reaching every corner of the hall. The big screen lit up instantly, displaying a black background, white text technical terminal interface. The accused claimed that this segment of code was written line by the three of them. My fingers hit the enter key on the keyboard. So, may I ask the accused, why in your final version of the compiled package submitted to the competition committee, lines 342 to 358 contain a segment that appears to be redundant yet is actually a 3-layer base 64 encoded obfuscation function? Emma's face suddenly changed, and she looked instinctively at Lily. A trace of confusion flashed in Lily's eyes. After receiving the code, they had only run and packaged it, not understanding the underlying, complex obfuscation logic at all. Then, that is the encryption defense line we added to prevent the code from being maliciously reverse-engineered. Emma forced out, raising her voice. Is that so? I smiled slightly and tapped the keyboard with my fingertips again. Since you added the encryption defense line, now, please, tell me, what is the 16-bit dynamic random seed used to unlock this obfuscated function? The conference hall fell silent. The three people at the inquiry seats looked pale, their mouths twitching, none able to utter a single character. You don't know, but I do. I turned around, facing the big screen, and pressed the final instruction string. 202409112 CHLOE original. When the enter key was pressed, the code on the terminal interface began to scroll rapidly. The previously chaotic ciphertext was decrypted and laid out in seconds. In the center of the large screen, a highlighted gold data box suddenly popped up. The data box contained no complex algorithmic logic, only one line of hexadecimal underlying characters rendered directly from the codespace, which, after being reversed through an irreversible hash, clearly spat out a line of giant font, author unique digital fingerprint, CHLOE/ID, for 20106200303912/timestamp, May 20th, 2024, 3:14 and 22 seconds. That was the exclusive digital fingerprint I embedded directly into the algorithm's core when I wrote the first line of core code 6 months ago. It clearly printed my name, identity card number, and the exact creation timestamp down to the second. What's more, as the decryption program fully ran, a second log immediately popped up on the terminal interface. It was the complete record collected by the code's built-in offline tracking script. It clearly marked the precise time when this code was downloaded, modified, and first opened on Lily's laptop MAC address, September 12, 2024 late at night, 23:40. That was the exact moment they sneaked into my cloud drive to steal files after I moved out of the dorm. No way. This can't be true. Emma suddenly slammed her hand on the table, shaking vigorously, pointing at the big screen, screaming, "You planted poison in the code. You are setting us up." Silence. The chairperson struck the gavel heavily, his face grim enough to drip with sweat. 7 members of the academic committee rose at once, walking quickly to the big screen, carefully verifying the hash checks and tamper-proof timestamp logs of that code. 3 minutes later, the expert group unanimously turned to the 3 people at the inquiry seat. The digital fingerprint and the underlying timestamp have absolute logical exclusivity and are not forgeable. The chairperson's voice was like a verdict. The accused party has plagiarized someone else's academic result, forged experimental data, and provided false testimony. The facts are clear. The evidence conclusive. Tap. Sarah's forged handwritten notebook slammed to the ground, the pages scattering. Emma sagged into her chair, her eyes hollow as she stared at the incredibly dazzling CHLOE name on the big screen. as if all the strength in her body had been drained at this moment. I steadied the hem of my suit, pulled out the black USB drive, nodded slightly toward the podium, then turned around and strode gracefully along the red-carpeted passage toward the exit of the conference hall. The city of Jiangling was exceptionally chilly in November. Fine diagonal rain tapping on the transparent floor-to-ceiling glass of the exhibition center, drawing winding trails of water. In the press conference hall on the second floor of the exhibition center, the flashbulbs fired in rapid succession. In order to salvage the catastrophic loss of reputation caused by the welcome party scandal and academic fraud, Emma's family business had joined forces with several so-called partners and urgently convened a press conference. They fancied a final gamble under the pretext that young entrepreneurs were framed by malicious competitors. Emma wore a well-tailored bespoke suit, with delicate makeup, and stood facing dozens of media cameras, dutifully reading a statement. Regarding the recent unfounded allegations circulated online about me personally and my team, we have fully entrusted our lawyers to collect evidence. All contracts involving false financial documents were forged by departing personnel who abused their positions. Our side is also a victim. Sarah and Lily stood in the shadows behind the press conference, hands curling the speech manuscript so tightly that their knuckles turned white from the strain. Suddenly, the side door of the conference hall was pushed open with a heavy thud. The sound of leather shoes striking the marble floor rang out, crisp and jarring, interrupting Emma's recital. For investigators in dark blue uniforms wearing strict law enforcement body cameras, and 3 staff members in tax inspection uniforms, escorted with meticulous steps and expressionless faces, walked straight up to the podium under the gaze of dozens of media cameras and countless flashes. The scene erupted in an uproar. The camera lenses immediately turned to focus on the center of the podium. Leading the economic crime investigation team pulled out his chest badge and a detention warrant stamped with a bright red seal, displaying them to Emma. Emma, Lily, Sarah, we are the Jiang City Public Security Bureau Economic Crime Investigation Brigade. We are now arresting you for alleged forgery of company seals, issuing false VAT invoices, embezzlement, and illegal transfer of public funds. Emma's words choked off, her smile freezing, the color draining from her face. You've got it wrong. Emma's voice trembled violently as she stepped back, knocking over the microphone stand behind her, producing a jarring screech from the mic. This is a corporate press conference. We are the victims. All the accounts were done by that student who already dropped out and left. Chloe. Victims? The head of the tax inspection team coldly interrupted her, pulling out a stack of raw certificate copies and a 4x3 map from his briefcase, and spreading them on the podium for the media to see. From September 15 to November 10, 2024, you used 3 shell companies, Xinqing Financial Consulting Company, Limited and 2 others, to issue 18 false ordinary invoices and VAT invoices, involving funds totaling over 1 million yuan. The forged seal numbers on the invoices, high-definition screenshots of the surveillance footage of the clubs during the illegal transactions, and the real fund flow chains revealed through the Economic Crime Investigation Technical Department all show that these illicit funds ultimately flowed into your 3 private personal accounts. The head of the inspection team turned, the stack of red-sealed evidence aimed squarely at the cameras of the dozens of media present. Just half an hour ago, the National Tax Bureau's Inspection Bureau sealed and frozen the shell companies and the individual accounts involved. All evidence chains have been authenticated by the Judicial Appraisal Center. The hall fell into dead silence, soon followed by an explosion of loud, relentless noise. The reporters' flashbulbs flashed wildly, capturing Emma's pale face and her dead gray expression on the podium. Behind the scenes, Sarah collapsed completely, her legs buckling as she fell to the ground with a despairing whine. Lily tried to slip away through the crowd via the back door but was stopped on the spot by the police waiting at the side door, and the icy black handcuffs snapped onto her wrists. I wore a charcoal gray knee-length trench coat, standing quietly at the last row by the glass window in the conference hall, watching the investigating police fasten the cold handcuffs on Emma's wrists, watching the 3 of them being escorted by the police through the long spotlighted corridor. I slowly raised my right hand, crumpled into a ball the useless invoice and draft slip in my hand, and casually tossed it into the trash. They thought they could build an impregnable wall with lies and forged accounts, but they didn't know that from the moment they personally received the first fake invoice at the club, the passport to hell had already been stamped with their names. Click. The rear door of the heavy police car was slammed shut, The siren cut through the rainy night's quiet, howling as it drove away. The fluorescent lights in the interrogation room were glare bright, and a strange smell of bleach mixed with damp cement filled the air. Sarah sat on the iron chair, handcuffed to the armrest, her hair disheveled, eyes bloodshot. Across from the interrogation table were two detectives and a toxicology expert from a national key laboratory. Sarah, regarding your theft of the highly toxic controlled chemical cyanide derivative reagent from the National Key Laboratory and your private concealment of it, the evidence is now fully closed. The detective patted the file on the table. We're giving you one last chance to confess. Sarah's lips trembled violently. She looked up suddenly, a trace of crazed luck in her eyes, and screamed hysterically, "I didn't steal it. I threw away that reagent long ago. No, I didn't steal the highly toxic reagent at all. In the cabinet you pried open in the dorm, there wasn't any poison at all. You have no physical evidence proving I touched a highly toxic substance." She still believed that what she secretly took from the cabinet in the lab was real poison, and as long as she refused to admit it and claimed the reagent had been destroyed, the police could not legally charge her with possession of dangerous items or attempted poisoning. Crack. The toxicology expert placed a black handheld 365 nanometer ultraviolet detector on the table, and casually drew the curtains of the interrogation room. The room instantly fell into darkness. "Do you think you stole a highly toxic reagent?" The expert's voice was unusually cold in the dim light. "In fact, before you acted, the reagents in the hazardous chemical cabinet in the lab had already been replaced with a fluorescent indicator containing a specific colorless marker. This indicator is non-toxic and harmless, but it has one property: it adheres easily and has an extremely stable molecular structure, and ordinary detergents cannot remove it." The expert pressed the detector switch. A blue ultraviolet beam shot through the interrogation room in an instant. Along the beam, Sarah's fingernails, the cuffs of the lab coat she wore that day, and the lining inside her handbag all glowed with an extremely dazzling light blue fluorescence. The fluorescence was so clearly shaped that it even appeared in the fingerprint patterns left on the bottle she was gripping with her palm. "No, impossible, this is impossible." Sarah stared at the blue fluorescence on her hands, pupils dilating, frantically rubbing her hands on her pants as if she'd seen a ghost, but the blue light remained dazzling under the ultraviolet. "Not only your clothes and bag." The detective opened a cold light screen and pulled up the scene photos. "In the concealed compartment you hid in dorm 302, and at the edge of the trash can where you attempted to destroy the items, we extracted the same origin fluorescence marker. The technical comparison results show that the marker's specificity code exactly matches the lab's filing records." The detective pulled out a qualitative report and slapped it heavily onto the table. "Because your intent to steal controlled dangerous chemicals is clear, and you engaged in a series of acts including damaging security facilities, privately concealing and transferring items, even though the actual stolen item was replaced in advance. Your actions fully meet the legal elements of embezzling dangerous substances and attempting to release dangerous substances. This is a criminal charge, Sarah." The detective looked at her coldly. "You will face up to more than 7 years in prison." "No! It's not like this. It's Chloe. She swapped the reagents. She set the trap to frame me." Sarah cried out in despair, her handcuffed hands slamming onto the iron bench with a harsh metallic clatter. "Police evidence only recognizes facts and physical evidence." The detective pushed open the iron door of the interrogation room. "Take her away." Formal arrest. 2 female police officers stepped forward, one on the left and one on the right, grabbing Sarah by the arms and dragging her out of the interrogation room, her body slack and mud-like. I stood at the corner of the police station corridor, watching Sarah being led toward the detention center passage through the half-open glass window. In mid-November at Jiang City University, the cold wind swept the main avenue, scattering the withered yellow sycamore leaves. In front of the large electronic bulletin screen on the first floor of the administrative building, a dense crowd of students had gathered long before. Among the crowd, muffled gasps and discussions erupted continually, nearly everyone holding up their phones to film the latest content on the screen. On the electronic screen, 3 red-titled documents issued jointly by the Party Committee, the Academic Affairs Office, and the Academic Committee were scrolling in bright high contrast. Decision on expulsion of 3 students: Emma, Sarah, Lily from the university, the document is piercing in every word. The reasoning is unusually clear. Emma. Forged company seals. Issued false financial invoices. Embezzled funds. Turned over to judicial authorities for criminal liability. Revoke all honors acquired during her time at the university. Expulsion from the university. Sarah. Stole controlled laboratory chemicals. Attempted poisoning and framing others. Formally arrested by the public security authorities and prosecuted. Expulsion from the university. Lily. Used her position as student union president to misappropriate funding. Colluded in academic fraud. Altered backstage accounts of activities. Expulsion from the university. And recovery of all illegal proceeds. Not just an internal notice. Within 10 minutes. The Ministry of Education's Academic Misconduct Exposure Platform, the Provincial Public Security Department's Criminal Cases Bulletin, and the official accounts of Jiang City's major local media simultaneously released a panoramic briefing of this university student union and academic fraud conspiracy that had exploded online. Once the briefing went out, public opinion exploded like a nuclear bomb. Too terrifying. Forged invoices. Stealing toxic reagents. Stealing someone else's code. These aren't college students. They're a criminal gang. I heard the student they framed, Chloe, had already moved out of the dormitory. If she hadn't left early, what would they have done to her? Support maximum punishment. These three must go to prison. The top 5 trending topics were completely dominated by the 3 of them. The luxury cars, brand name bags, and forged scholarship certificates they boasted about on social media were unearthed one by angry netizens, becoming the most glaring jokes. Along with the online denunciations came a devastating chain reaction. The stock price of Emma's family business hit the limit down as soon as the market opened. Partners presented contracts and demanded compensation, citing serious damage to brand image and involvement in financial fraud, offering tens of millions in breach of contract damages. Emma's parents sat in a mess of an office, facing debt collectors and tax seals, sinking into despair. Sarah's father came from his hometown, carrying 2 bags of specialties, knelt outside the principal's office for half a day, tearfully pleading, trying to trade for a reprieve to stay on campus by claiming the child is still young and it's a momentary lapse. However, the Dean of Academic Affairs opened the door and handed him only a cold legal text and an officially stamped withdrawal notice return form. Sir, what they have violated is criminal law. They have harmed national key scientific research safety and the futures of several innocent students. The school has no authority and cannot override the law. Lily's parents frantically tried to contact me, attempting to privately settle with a large sum to obtain a letter of forgiveness from me in court. I sat by the apartment floor-to-ceiling window, watching the unknown incoming calls and pleading messages keep popping up on my phone screen. My fingertips moved slightly and I directly put all those numbers on the blacklist. Forgiveness? Before reincarnation, when they pushed me off the rooftop on that cold, biting rainy night and my head hit the cement with a heavy thud, did they ever think of leaving me a path to live? Beyond the window, 3 delivery vans marked Postal Express slowly parked below the dormitory building. The courier delivered 3 expulsion notices packaged in express mail, together with the service receipt for judicial documents, and formally handed them to the campus security representative who had long been waiting downstairs. The once dazzling, omnipotent trio on campus had, by this moment, been eroded beyond recognition in the face of academic norms, campus rules, and society at large. They believed they had outwitted everything, but did not realize that when the gears of fate turned to this moment, all that remained for them was the ever-fervent red seal on the expulsion notice and the looming years behind iron bars. I closed my laptop and drew the curtains. The afternoon sun pierced the clear glass and spilled across the entire study. In mid-December, the 3rd trial court of Jiang City. The atmosphere was solemn and grave. The audience seats were filled with reporters from various media, representatives of teachers and students from schools, and the families of the defendants with sallow, defeated faces, accompanied by a crisp sound of the gavel. The whole court stood. The side door of the bench opened, and 3 figures in gray inmate outfits, with chains clinking on hands and feet, were escorted by court guards to the defendant's bench. Emma's hair was cut into a messy short style, her delicate features no longer, eyes hollow, filled with numbness and fear, Sarah trembled uncontrollably, unable to look up at the spectators. Lily drooped her head, her once proud spine completely hunched. The judge slowly opened the verdict, his loud and stern voice resounding through the courtroom. The Jiang City Intermediate People's Court, after trial, finds the defendants Emma, Sarah, and Lily guilty of forging official seals of state organs and enterprises, issuing VAT invoices falsely, stealing regulated hazardous chemicals, embezzling public funds, and misappropriating others' academic result. The facts are clear, the evidence is conclusive, and the charges are established. In accordance with the relevant provisions of the People's Republic of China criminal law, the following sentences are pronounced. Defendant Emma, for the crimes of issuing VAT invoices falsely, forging company seals, and embezzlement, multiple offenses, is sentenced to 8 years imprisonment and a fine of 500,000 yuan. Defendant Sarah, for the crimes of misappropriating hazardous substances and releasing hazardous substances, attempted, is sentenced to 6 years imprisonment. Defendant Lily, for embezzlement and conspiring to forge financial instruments, is sentenced to 5 years imprisonment and a fine of 200,000 yuan. All illicit gains and embezzled funds shall be confiscated in accordance with the law and returned to the victimized units and individuals. The gavel struck heavily, producing a sound that pierced the soul. 8 years, 8 years. Emma's mother, behind the defendant's bench, burst into howling cries and fainted against the chair back. Emma herself grew faint, collapsing heavily against the iron railing of the defendant's bench, tears and snot running freely, emitting a piercing and desperate scream. Judge, I was wrong. I'm willing to pay the money. Please, give me another chance. Sarah and Lily were dragged by the guards toward the exit passage, the iron shackles dragging on the floor, making a harsh, squeaking sound. They turned their heads and unintentionally scanned the last row of the audience seats. There, I sat quietly in the shadows. I wore a well-tailored dark blue suit, a clean white shirt beneath, and stood tall like a pine. In the moment they looked at me, I did not mock, nor glare grimly. I simply faced their desperate, remorseful, and painful gaze with extreme calm, and then quietly averted my eyes. 8 years, 6 years, 5 years, these are the prices they must pay for their greed, cruelty, and sin. And their lives will rot completely behind high walls and iron bars. I rose, straightened the hem of my suit, and reached out to lift the heavy leather briefcase beside me. Inside the briefcase lay the National Key Scientific Project approval letter, fully authenticated with my own digital fingerprint, and an invitation to attend at the top academic summit next week. I turned around, pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom. Outside, the cold rain and snow had long ceased, and the blinding sunlight bathed the land. The cold wind swept my long hair, and the air was so fresh it made one feel exhilarated. I stepped forward, one step at a time, descending the grand stone steps of the courthouse, facing the bright sun ahead, toward a truly new life that belonged to me. Extra chapter. The front page printing press of the Evening Chronicle in Jiang City roared to a halt at 4 a.m. The black and white newspaper was pushed along the conveyor to the bundling area. The top news photo of the sensational court scene glaring from the headline, Emma, Sarah, and Lily, in gray prison uniforms, escorted by bailiffs, lowering their heads as they stepped into the police car. As the newspapers were delivered to kiosks around the city, the town was just waking up. In the visiting room of the women's prison, Emma sat across from the other side of thick bulletproof glass, holding a pitch-dark telephone handset, her fingers blanching from overexertion. The person across the glass was the liquidator of her family's business bankruptcy. Miss Emma, this is a debt collection notice from the court. The liquidator's voice, transmitted through the handset, was completely devoid of emotion. Your 2 houses, your stock accounts, and that Maserati have all been forcibly auctioned. After paying the tax penalties for false invoicing and recovering embezzled funds, the auction proceeds still cannot cover the other party's breach of contract claims. Emma's eye sockets were dry, and she couldn't even summon tears. Her hair had been cut to a short bob, she had lost the luxury skincare regimen, and her skin seemed dull and lifeless. Where are my parents? Her voice was hoarse, like sand rubbing together. Your father is suspected of jointly forging official seals and transferring assets and was conditionally released for interrogation last week. Your mother mortgaged and compensated with the only house, and has moved into a subsidized apartment in the suburbs. The liquidator organized the documents, stood up. Additionally, Jiang City University has issued the original notices of your 3 expulsions and the criminal judgments, permanently archived in the National Personal Integrity and Academic Degree Records database. In other words, even after you are released 8 years later, this record will remain irrevocably on your resume. The call was disconnected. Busy tone buzzing. Emma slowly lowered the handset, turned under the cold supervision of the bailiffs, and walked toward the dim, narrow corridor of the prison yard. At the end of the corridor, the television was airing the midday news. The newsfeed shifted to the main banquet hall of Jiang City Technology Exhibition Center. The camera zoomed in to display a prominent subtitle: National Key Young Scientists Fund Award Ceremony and Multimodal Data Security Launch. In the center of the frame, Chloe stood on the spotlight in a sharp black suit. In front of her were 3 high-precision server terminals, and behind her, on a massive LED screen, the algorithm model they had once stolen was now running smoothly, only this time the model architecture had been upgraded, with the bottom clearly marked with international patent authorization numbers and Chloe's independent signature. Dr. Chloe, a national technology media journalist in the audience, raised a microphone and asked, "I've heard this algorithm once faced severe theft and falsification crises. How did you maintain your development progress and achieve verification in the face of adversity?" Chloe stood at the lectern, her gaze calm and profound. "Code and rules never lie." Her voice clearly echoed through the TV's loudspeakers, reaching the narrow prison corridor. "Some people think they can steal someone else's result by manipulating the system, forging documents, and moral coercion, but they forget that any shortcut that defies logic and the law is doomed to collapse from the very beginning." The audience erupted in a fierce round of applause. Emma stopped in the corridor, gazing blankly at Chloe on the TV screen. That face carried neither smug triumph nor post-revenge joy, only a mountain's unmoved serenity. The kind of calm you feel when she quietly pulled her suitcase and walked out of dormitory 302, with no glance back toward them. "What are you looking at? Go back to your room now." The stern voice of the bailiff rang out from behind. Emma jerked back to her senses, being shoved toward the iron gate. The metal door slammed shut with a crisp, desperate click, completely sealing off all light and bustle outside. At this moment, the exhibition center's hall was bathed in sunlight pouring through the towering glass dome, shining endlessly over Chloe. The award presenter handed the heavy trophy to her. She gripped the trophy, faced the countless cameras and applause, and, with a steady stride, walked onto the path that had completely shed the shadows and led to endless radiance.